Tom Spadea, franchise attorney, founding partner of Spadea Lignana. And I want to talk to you today about the steps and costs to launch your business as a franchise system. I get asked this question a lot, and I guess the first question, the sort of predecessor question is, what makes a business franchisable? There are three attributes in my experience and my estimation that make a business franchisable. One, is it local in nature? Is it sort of Amazon proof? Do you need boots on the ground? I mean, a lot of people think restaurants as a franchise, and obviously restaurants are the key example of something that's franchisable. But there are many more franchises. In fact, maybe only a third of our clients are actually restaurants, service businesses, gyms, retail, non-retail, man in a van, junk removal, roofing, any of these businesses that are local in nature that need someone to service the clients in their local market is the really first step towards a business being franchisable. Think Amazon proof. My business, for instance, as a franchise lawyer is not franchisable because I have clients in California, I have clients in Ohio, here in Philadelphia, where we're based, and all across the country, and through Zoom and trade shows and meetings and document preparation, we can do that anywhere, so we can be centralized. We don't need necessarily the boots on the ground in a local market. So that's that first attribute of franchising. And then number two is profitability. And this, it has to have the margins. Businesses that are very low margin, that can't be scaled up, I'm a big believer in reading the E-Myth, shout out to Michael Gerber. That business helped transform our business and something I recommend other people. You have to be able to look at your business and say, are there sufficient margins? Are the unit economics of this business that you can concentrate and grow and have enough volume and profitability to build it as a franchise and have a franchisor and build this ecosystem nationally? And the third, and I think the most important variable, is the owner and founder of the mindset of being a franchisor. That is critical. It's often like, I have a dog. You'll see a lot of pictures of, we're a big dog friendly office here. And, if you bring your dog to a dog trainer, they're not just training the dog, they're training the owner. And I think franchising is very similar to that. People ask me, is the business franchisable? And my question is the owner of the mindset to be a franchisor? Do you want to be a coach instead of a player? Obviously, you want to be a great player, but can you translate that towards coaching and excellence and build a team around you and impart your knowledge and then share in the financial success? At the end of the day, that's really the essence of franchising. Strip away the state registrations, the FDD, all the things that I'm going to talk about today about the legalities of franchising, but think at its core, franchising is about education. You've created a business model. You've had success. You've provided for your family. You've met a local market need. And now you want to grow. You can either grow through corporate stores and building infrastructure and hiring people and managers in far-flung regions, or you can package this as a business model for rent. Take your intellectual property, take all this knowledge, the scar tissue, the mistakes, the challenges that you've had over the years, put that into a package, come up with an economic reality and structure around that, charge other folks to do the business that you've done, and then share in that and then continuously improve and iterate and build an ecosystem. That's what franchising is about. It's an education system. It's a teaching system. It's a mechanism to take your business model and expand it nationally through knowledge. And it's why it's such a powerful system, probably the best invented expansion system for small businesses to grow and scale quickly. So those are the three things. It has to be local in nature, has to be profitable, good unit economics, and the owner has to be of the mindset to be a franchisor. Those are the three things that make a business franchisable. So now we're going to go through and we're going to talk about the steps and the cost to launch your business as a franchise. There are really 7 major steps of launching a franchise. Creating a profitable business, we talked about, that's sort of pre even having a conversation with someone like me. The second step is getting your trademarks in order, sorting out your intellectual property. The third step is refining your entity structure and really understanding the franchisor as a sole entity, your corporate stores and all that. The fourth step is a franchise consultant, someone to help coach you to be a franchisor, the coach's coach, help with your operations manual, help put all the things together, not the legal piece of it, but all the other things together to build this infrastructure so that when you open, when you create that offering, you're ready to go and service your potential franchisees. And then the fifth, which is what we handle, the FDD, the franchise agreement, preparing all of those legal documents. The sixth is getting your financial statements. Those get inserted into the FDD, and we'll talk about that in more detail. And then obviously the seventh is going to be going out there with branding, going to the market and having that offering. So we're going to go through these step by step. Number one, creating a profitable business. Well, I talked about it before about, what was the 3 steps of what makes a business franchisable. Well, having a business that's profitable, that is local in nature, that you can generate income, high margins, the business seems duplicatable, you're not in the business. Another thing that I always tell people when they come to me to franchise the business, if you call me, we'll talk about this, is have you got it down to the point that you're maybe working 20, 25 hours a week in the business? If you're making the pizza, if you're checking people in at the gym, if you're climbing up on the roof every single day, you're not ready to franchise your business. So the business has to be profitable, but it also has to be run in such a way that you have time to devote to the franchise. You can't just say, hey, I'm just going to create an FDD in these documents, sell the franchise. I've heard people, and I tell them not to franchise. They come to me and say, I want to franchise my business because we need to raise money and we're a little short on cash. Hold on, Jack, you're not ready. You don't franchise, you franchise your business for building generational wealth. If your goal is a 2x or 3x, you want to double or triple your income and your net worth over the next 5 to 6 years, don't franchise. It's too much work. It's too much risk in terms of your time and your effort and your energy. You franchise for a 50 or 100x return. Franchising is to go after generational wealth, scale, national scale, creating an enterprise. It's a completely different business. And so that's the mindset that you have to have. And the cornerstone is creating that profitable business and having that. The next step, the second major step in creating a franchise system is your trademarks. So trademarks, you have to have a name. A lot of people, maybe close to half of the people who come to us to franchise their business have some sort of issue with their name. And so I want to talk a little bit about trademarks, and we evaluate that as someone coming in and, we'll talk about their name. One thing that a lot of business owners do is they create a descriptive name. They say, hey, I'm the shoemaker, because in the beginning, no one knows who they are. So they want to create a business for instant recognition of what their product is, so that the local market understands, hey, if I want to go to Tom the shoemaker, I see the sign on the door says shoemaker, let me go there. From a trademark standpoint and ultimately a franchising standpoint, that's a mistake. First of all, you're going to struggle to get the name. And people will ask their trademark attorneys or ask me, can I get the trademark? That is only half of the evaluation. Can you get the trademark? Can you say, well, I know it's descriptive, but we won't do this, we won't do this. Trademarks are counterintuitive. It's not just about can you use the name, it's can you exclude others from using the name. I'm going to run that back one more time. Getting a good trademark is not only your ability to use that name with your clients and build your brand equity, it's your ability to exclude anyone else from using that name. So now you think of big brands, big trademarks, Nike, Disney, all of these names, some of these names out there that are unique, that don't describe it. Think even Apple computers. Apple has nothing to do with computers. Therefore, they can exclude others. The best names are these made up names. You watch TV and you see all these, crazy drug company names that you're like, why would they come up with these goofy names? One of the main reasons is a completely made up name is your strongest trademark. The second trademark is going to be a name that doesn't mean what it says. So the further you get away from the description of your business in the trademark, the stronger your trademark is, which is counterintuitive. If you have a business that has a reasonably generic name, and there may be others who came up with that same name throughout the country, and so your goal here, remember, go back. We're not trying to double or triple the income. We're going for a 50 100x, generational wealth. This is a decade play. We're looking for clients that want to be with us for a decade, for a long time, build the infrastructure, get this thing started. And if you want to have that, we're looking around corners, we're thinking deep into the process, and the trademark is something that is critical to that. So that's your trademarks. You got to spend some time on it. It might cost you a little bit of money, and it's not just about having your name. It's about excluding others from having your name. So that's one thing that I wanted to tell you. The third process is your entity structure. And, we have some resources on our website. We're going to give you, if you join us to franchise your business, we're going to give you kind of a report, a plan. Now, you don't want to go crazy. If you're very well funded and you want to go national and you want to be in a bunch of states and you want to get out there out of the gate, then we can do the very formal structure of your trademark should sit in a separate entity. Your franchisor should be a brand new, clean entity. You're going to need audited financials. So you want to have your trademark. You want to have your financial statements done every year, prepared, and as simple as possible. So the less transactions coming through there, the easier. And there's a host of reasons. There's some defensive reasons of why you want to keep your trademark separate. You want to keep your corporate stores separate. If you're selling product or you ultimately want to license and your name becomes big, it may be valuable outside the franchise arena. So you just want to give some thought to that. And you don't want your store sales to be in the entity that's trademarking. So you need some separation there. And we will walk you through that. There's a best practice in the industry that we've refined over the years. It's relatively simple. Honestly, we're franchise attorneys, so we'll give guidance. If you have a corporate attorney, we play well with others. You might have someone local. You could be in Minnesota and you have a local corporate attorney that's been with you from the beginning. We'll walk him or her through that structure of what we would like to see as a best practice. And once again, we're playing the long game. We're looking around corners. Is it necessary for today? Is it necessary to get out of the gate? No, but we're building for the long-term value. And so you want to know, look, we do it backwards. My personal practice area deals with private equity. And when people come to buy a franchise system, they have some expectations. They know what they want to see. They want to see a certain entity structure, a certain level of FDD, the way that your deal room is constructed. We'll start with the end in mind, right? I'm a big believer in, another shout out to a favorite author of Stephen Covey. Start with the end in mind. And if you're starting with the end in mind, that comes all the way back to who is your franchisor and a holding company. And we'll bring you through that whole structure. The next major step in launching a franchise is dealing with a franchise consultant. And we deal with, and you have to be very careful here. This is an area that is fraught with risk. You have people on what I would call the low end who, you see them sometimes at these trade shows and they're sort of like carnival barkers and they're just saying, hey, we can, we'll franchise your business, no problem. And their mindset is the opposite of what we're talking about here. They're not starting with the end in mind. They're starting with their end in mind. They just are going to give you documents, pull a template down, tell you how easy it is, charge you money. Sometimes you don't even get your own lawyer. They're like, oh, our lawyer blesses these documents. Do not do it. Even selfishly, there's plenty of good franchise lawyers. Get your own franchise lawyer. These documents are paramount. They're the cornerstone to all of your intellectual property. You have spent years building this business up, and now you're going to let someone in and give them the secrets to your business. If you don't protect yourself with the right documents, if you don't get the state registrations, I have this on my wall. You've probably seen that on our site. There's a bunch of states that you have to go through. This stuff, it's not so complicated and so onerous that it can't be managed. But you get people who are franchise consultants who make it sound so easy. Be careful of that because it's not easy. It's worth it, but it's not easy. A lot of people who franchise their business never get to scale. They never get to 5, 10 locations. And it's because of a variety of reasons. One, their franchisees don't make money. They pick the wrong people, but they also start out on the wrong foot and they pick someone who told them it was going to be easy. So what is a franchise consultant? And this could cost you, $50,000 to $100,000. This is not legal fees. This is not money you're paying to us, but it's money that gets you started on the right foot. They're going to help you write your operations manual. They're going to take all of the information that you have, all this knowledge that you've been building up over the years, and they're going to basically translate it into a franchise system. They're going to create a training schedule. and they're going to teach you how to be a franchisor. They're going to give you best practices. They're going to walk you through what your royalty should be, what your franchise fee should be, what your territory should be, and give you that structure so that your business, the next step that we'll talk about is drafting the legal documents, your FDD and your franchise agreement. We're going to ask about 100 business questions. We need those answered in such a way that we can, so that's how this stuff all interacts, right? Our job is we're almost like the computer programmers. We're going to program all these business thoughts into a enforceable, compliant franchise document, an FDD that you give to your candidates and is going to really be the legal backbone behind your agreement. But the franchise consultants are sort of like, if you've been in software, the UX, they're going to design the experience, the user experience for the franchisees, the beginning seeds of your ecosystem, and help coach you and teach you. So it's not just about slinging documents on the wall. It's really about creating something of lasting value. Remember, when you launch a franchise, and if you're here and watching this video, you're into how do I get to that? It is not the finish line. When your franchise launches, that is the starting line, not the finish line. And there's a lot of people out there who make it sound like that's the finish line. It's not. The game has just started when you get your FDD. So you be wary. And then on the flip side, there's also people out there who are telling you this is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's $500,000, $1 million to launch a franchise. That's not true either. Could you blow through that money? Sure. There's a middle ground. There's a value. You have to have a sufficient amount. Overall, it's going to cost you $100,000 to $200,000 to get your business properly prepared and launched as a franchise. Legal, you have the infrastructure, you've thought it through, you've refined your trademarks, you've done all this pre-work, and it's going to take you about 3 to 6 months maybe to get that done. Some people take a lot longer, but that's about the expectations. At a very high level, it's about $100,000 to $200,000, and it takes about 3 to 6 months. Some people think, oh my God, I can get this done in 30 days. No, you can't. Some people think, oh, this is going to take me 2 years and cost me $1 million. No, that's not necessary. So you got to really find that restaurant. And a good franchise consultants, of which we work with, in fact, there are people who will come to us and will say, you don't really, be careful with these folks. And so you got to check their references. You got to see their successes. And you really that's a very, very important piece of this puzzle. A good franchise consultant can make all the difference in success or failure. They're going to guide you to what you're going to need to build your business. And then the next part, the major part, what we do. Your FDD and your franchise agreement. These are the legal documents. This is what is legally required to be a franchisor. If you think about franchising, it is a disclosure. The rules are set up. This is all set up through the Federal Trade Commission. Congress passed some laws back in the 70s. There were people running around who were just charging people any kind of fee, and it was the Wild West. Hey, give me 30 grand and I'll teach you how to do the business. And, it started getting a little kind of wonky and people were taking advantage of people. So the government stepped in. First, some state governments stepped in, which is actually the remnants of what we have here, the state registration maps. So the state government said, the big, more regulatory prone states, New York, Illinois, California, and said, hey, we don't really like what's going on here. So we need some uniformity, because the state started telling people, you got to tell people. And basically, what the FDD is, there are 23 items. And so whether you're looking at a McDonald's franchise or a junk removal franchise or any franchise, those 23 items are always the same. They're dictated by federal law. And it starts with your affiliates. When we talked about that entity structure, that that's all in item 1. Who are you? Who are the owners? Item 2, the history of the management team. Who are the people that the franchisee is going to lean on? Number 3, litigation. Has there been anything, have you been sued for fraud and securities fraud? And number 4, bankruptcy. Have any of the principals gone bankruptcy? And hey, this is America. You have a chance to reboot. And so that's okay. You can disclose it. Maybe someone went through a divorce. Maybe they had a business that failed. That doesn't scare me so much, because the reality is, as a franchisee, you are buying into the learning of the franchisor and their management team, including their mistakes, all the scar tissue, all the things that they did that they wouldn't do today are where you're at. So the FDD is this disclosure document. If you've ever owned if you've owned a a stock and a bank, and they send you these notices and all these things you get in the mail, and you just end up tossing them. Well, the FDD is something that people should read, because these are notices that the government says, hey, you need these 23 items to tell people, to level the information playing field. It's all about informing the buyer of this franchise what they're getting into. And you have a lot of latitude, especially at the federal level, about what you can agree to as long as you disclose it. And then in the back of that, so this is these 23 items for a new franchisor. The piece of your FDD that's the disclosure is maybe 60, 70 pages. We talked about the franchise consultant and about the operations manual. One of the disclosures is the table of contents of your operations manual. We're going to talk about financial statements. That's one of the items. We talked about trademarks. That's item 13. What's your trademark? Is it pending? Do you have it? Are you comfortable with this going national? So all of these disclosures, so a franchisee can read this document and say, oh, okay, I understand this offering now. I understand the cost to get in. There's charts and costs, and the franchise consultant will help you outline that about what needs to be in that disclosure document. And then that goes in, and one of the exhibits is going to be your franchise agreement. So the franchise agreement is really the governing document. That is the equivalent to a lease. If you have a retail lease, you go and you sign a lease with the landlord, and that allows you to rent the space for a certain amount of years. And it lays out all the parameters. Hey, who's going to fix the HVAC? Who's going to snowplow the lot? Well, in a way, your franchise agreement is exactly that. That's your agreement with your franchisee. They get to use the trademark. They have to follow certain rules. It's for so many years. They have to pay royalties. And that's going to be another 60, 70 page documents. And so those two pieces together are the core to your legal documents. You have your FDD, the disclosure piece, and your franchise agreement, which is the actual contract. And some people get confused, even people who have been in franchising a long time. I hear them say, oh, they signed the FDD 3 years ago. So what's that? What are they under there? Well, you're looking at it wrong. You gave them the FDD, which was a picture in time. So a new FDD is obviously the picture in time of your opening. 1 year later, you're going to have to update your FDD. We're going to have to put in there any franchisees that you signed. We're going to put in there their information so that people can, that's this feedback loop, this ecosystem that we talk about. So prospective franchisees can talk to existing franchisees in your system, even franchisees who have left your system. And if you've had any lawsuits, we have to update the disclosure. You're going to learn after a year. Oh, you know what? We thought it was going to be X amount of dollars to do this, but we realized that we need an architect here, so we're going to have to double that price. Or we think we should spend a little bit more money in grand opening marketing when they open, because they'll have a stronger opening. We had one, she spent double what we said, and it worked fabulously. So we're going to incorporate that for new franchisees moving forward. So it's a picture in time for anybody who's going to buy the franchise. That's the disclosure they get. The franchise agreement, think of it like a booster rocket and a rocket ship. I love analogies. So you have the FDD is the booster rocket. The FDD pushes the agreement into orbit, so to speak. And then they sign the franchise agreement. And once they sign the franchise agreement, the FDD burns off, because they use that information to evaluate the franchise agreement. Then they sign the franchise agreement. Now you're locked into this contract. It's essentially a licensing agreement about they're licensing your trademark, and the three-legged stool of franchising is charging them a fee, use of your name, and then telling them and assistance and operating systems of how to do. So many licenses, people are like, oh, I just want a license. I don't want a franchise. Well, if you're going to tell them anything and control your brand, which you should, not let anyone use your brand name without giving guidance and control, you're probably a franchise. So that franchise agreement, said another way, is a licensing agreement. All franchise agreements are licensing agreements. Not all licensing agreements are franchise agreements. So they sign the franchise agreement, and then that's what's going to dictate the relationship. That's what our job is. Our job is to make sure that that agreement captures the relationship and captures your goals. It focuses on the 10-year horizon. It focuses on or longer horizon. What does private equity want to see? What does the value want to see? Where are there mistakes and holes and things you haven't even thought of in terms of, who's going to be responsible for getting the local licenses? If the franchisee comes up with a new improvement, we want to ensure that you own that as the franchisor. So all these things, doing this for a very long time, for decades, and with our team and hundreds of brands, and seeing them on the exit and seeing the mistakes and problems and saying it's almost like we're a franchisor. Those holes that you're going to step in, that has to be incorporated and built into the franchise agreement, and it has to survive for a long time. So when someone signs a franchise agreement, they're going to be governed by that franchise agreement for a very long time, because if you make changes, you only make changes when they sell or they retire or they exit or they renew. So you have to kind of have a lot of forethought towards that. And then a lot of people think about, and the regulations are written for the FDD to protect the franchisee, but I would say that the FDD protects the franchisor. The reason being is that you want to depend on the enforceability. You're not being paid, you're not being compensated for the risk of the unit. If a unit fails, that should be on the franchisee, because you're only getting your royalty, you're only getting your small upfront fee. Conversely, if the unit is massively profitable, you're still only getting your royalty. And so you're not being compensated to take the risk of ownership. If you have a flawed FDD, and this goes back to some of the people in the industry who are like, oh, just take an FDD and don't worry about it. If that thing is not compliant, if you haven't really thought that through, if you mess up one of these state registrations and you try to get the FDD, or you sell a franchise where you're not allowed to sell a franchise, then you're compromising that individual sale. And if there's a problem with that unit, that could come back on you. So the reason the FDD protects you as the franchisor is you've met your threshold obligation. You've explained the offering, you've explained the risk, they've agreed to it, you crossed all your T's and dotted your I's, they've had that FDD for the 14 days that they need it, and this is something that we go through this compliance training with you about how to actually use the FDD after you launch, and then they sign the franchise agreement. And now the franchise agreement is enforceable. And that is really the key to this whole offering, is to have an enforceable, compliant franchise agreement that you can depend on for many, many, many years. When someone's looking at your brand, if you go to private equity, and we've been through those transactions many times, they're going to go all the way back to day one and say, what does this FDD look like? What does your state registrations look like? What's your compliance program look like? What do these agreements look like? Can we depend on them? Or were you just pulling something out of the air that didn't really exist? So that is the key. The FDD and the franchise agreement are the legal documents that govern this relationship. And the reason franchisors are so valuable is the reason that they're valued similar to software companies is really, it is very analogous to software. It is very similar. You build something, you get it right. It's expensive to get it right on the first pass. The cost, we're talking about, $100,000 to $200,000 to launch this first franchise, and then you have all these ongoing costs. Well, that first franchisee paying royalties, you're not going to make a lot of money on that. That's okay, just like software. The first person that drove Uber cost a lot, millions and millions of dollars to make that customer experience work. It's the incremental profits of why software is valued so much. Same thing with franchising. Your first couple of years, you're probably going to be depending on that, step one, creating profitable business to pay your bills as you invest in the franchise and you get this thing going. And then long term is when you're going to get the payback. Long term, you're going to get the payback because the incremental cost, the first, when you open your 11th franchise unit, it's going to be more efficient, less expensive than opening your 10th. Your 12th, more efficient, less expensive than your 11th. And that is the value of franchising. I used to work for a national franchisor. We had, when I joined, it was 300 units. When I left, it was 500 units, and we had maybe 20 something people in the corporate office. So, franchisors in the beginning sometimes are smaller enterprises than their biggest franchisees. And that is why they're so valuable, right? That is what do they say? That's it's a feature, not a bug of this efficiency, but it takes a while to get that thing going. And your FDD and your franchise agreement are the cornerstone. You're an intellectual property company. You're no longer making hamburgers. You're no longer picking up junk or cleaning roofs. You are cleaning gutters. You are an intellectual property company. That's the journey of being a franchisor. And it takes time, it takes money, and it takes patience. And that's the journey that you want to go on. The last couple steps of actually getting to that launch date are putting together these financial statements. Being this disclosure that we talked about, it's leveling the information playing field. Well, the government says, can you support these franchisees? Do you have enough funds? Well, we're going to make you show all of your prospective franchisees the financial health of your company. So you have to put financial statements together. And for most of them, it's a brand new entity. You're going to drop in some cash. We'll bring you through that. But that's another cost that sometimes people miss. That's another cost that sometimes the unsophisticated franchise consultants who are just thinking about franchise sales and getting you launched miss. Because if you're going to go in New York or some of these other states, you will need full-blown audited financial statements on day one. There is a phase-in at the federal level that we'll talk about, and it's going to cost you, $1,000 on the low end to just have a balance sheet non-audited, all the way up to maybe $15,000 for audited statements. It is expensive. But you can't cut corners there because it's part of that foundation, and it's one of these ongoing costs that you're going to incur every year. We certainly can make recommendations of good auditors. It's probably not your local CPA who's doing your taxes and your books. This is totally different. This is audited financial statements that you need to do every single year that you're a franchisor. It's part of that overhead. Back to the software analogy. You have a certain amount of overhead that you need to cover and spend. It's not millions of dollars a year, but it's not zero. And so you have to commit to that as a franchisor, that you're going to do this properly and you're going to cover this overhead. But then again, that comes that incremental value of why franchises are so valuable, is because once you cover that overhead, you start to become very profitable. And then you're going to have to think about getting the word out. You're going to have to change your messaging, and you're going to have to convert your messaging into, how do you get franchises? What's your value? Remember, you're no longer selling widgets. You're selling how to make widgets. It's a different business. You're in a different business model. You've made that leap of you're now that coach, you're now the educator. So you got to think about a franchise landing page and how are you going to go out? And there's a whole infrastructure. There's a whole ecosystem of franchise sellers, of people who are out there, of people who can help. Do you hire someone in-house? Do you train and learn it? Is it, sometimes the best franchise sales are the people you already know, the people in your ecosystem who understand your business already, who are maybe customers and brand ambassadors. So you're just going to have to carve out some money to think about that so that you can get launched, you can get into the market, and you can go. And, start conservative. That's what we always preach. This is a long-term play. Start conservative, concentric circles. If you want to get to 50 units, you're not going to do that by doing 10 deals a year for 5 years. You're going to do 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. And the successful franchisors that we have seen, that's how they do it, is they get the first couple right and they get profitable, and it takes a while. And then we put them back in the FDD. Every year you're updating your FDD. You're putting in who your franchisees are. And so you create this snowball effect that can be positive or can be negative. And you get this validation, and it creates this flywheel, right? That's kind of going, and the franchisees start to, validate is what they're called, because you have to do validation calls and franchisee prospects. It's getting those first couple off the ground is really the trick of building momentum for a franchise system. So to wrap up, the 7 major steps to launching a franchise system. It's going to cost you about $100,000 to $200,000. It's probably going to take you 3 to 6 months to do it. And you need to have a profitable business. That's priceless. You need to create your trademarks, or at least refine it. Some people, when they come here and call us, they've already done that. But I like to take a deep dive on that, take a look and see what we have. That's going to cost you anywhere from, as I said, nothing up to maybe $3,000 to get some marks. It's not crazy. You have to refine your entity structure, understand who owns what, where the intellectual property is, just some of the back end that just needs to be done. And that's going to cost you anywhere from maybe $1,000 to $10,000. Then you have your franchise consultant. A good franchise consultant is going to cost you $50,000 to $100,000. Do not cheap out on this part of it. Do not, a lot of people come, I've been doing this forever, I can do it myself. You can. There's no legal restriction against handling the franchise consultant piece yourself. But if you want to have great value and you want to really do that, you're going to be better off by going through a franchise consultant, and an experienced one and a good one. And then your FTD and your franchise agreement. That's going to cost you anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000, depending on the level of detail and how many you need, whether you're a master or that, and we'll go through all of that. And then your financial statements, as I said, you're going to get a CPA who's experienced in franchising, and that's going to cost you between $1,000 at the low end, maybe all the way up to $15,000 for a full-blown audit. And then that branding and marketing, kind of budget in there $5,000 to $50,000 just to get off the ground, get your website, get your messaging out there, get a little bit of a social media presence, telling the world, hey, I'm now franchising. You've loved my brand as a consumer. Now you can, open up your own. And that's it. And we'd love to walk you through this and what that process is. Give me a call, send an email, fill out the contact form. We'll jump on a Zoom. We'll talk about this stuff, and I'll help break down exactly whether you should be franchised or not. Don't worry. We're plenty busy. We have plenty of clients. We love what we do. I have no problem telling you you're not ready and saying these are the steps you're going to need to take. Let's talk in a year. This is a long-term play. Don't rush into it. There's a lot of people who don't make it in franchising, and it breaks my heart. They spend all this money, all this time and effort. I'd rather have fewer, more successful clients than just have everybody franchise their business. And I think that is something that we're interested in. And these stories to me are wonderful. I love hearing about it. So please reach out to me. I want to hear your story. I want to understand why you want to franchise. What is it about? What's that unique proposition about your business? The passion that you've brought to your business. You've already done what 90% of business owners can't do, which is get to this level of success so that you could even consider franchising. And to me, to have that conversation with these founders or owners, it's very exciting, and I love to learn about it. And then we can just play our part and help coach you to the next level of entrepreneurship, which is really big time, where you start to franchise and you start to bring some value. So give me a call. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching.